And just like that, we've reached the final Premier League weekend of the season. Seems just like yesterday, back in August, we were looking ahead to the new campaign and making our predictions and getting them wrong. Hello, everyone. Mark Donaldson alongside Don Hutchison. We're going to have predictions to see who's going to get the Champions League spots. In addition to Liverpool, Arsenal and Tottenham Hotspur, 5 into 3 doesn't go. We're going to look back in the next half hour at our Player of the Year, our Manager of the Year, our Surprise of the Year, and our Flop of the Year. But I want to start, Dawn, with the Champions League race. No title race at this last weekend of the season. That's decided. We know who's going down, but we don't know who's going to be in European competition. Let's start with Manchester City. They're in third. They go to Fulham. A draw's probably going to be enough. They'll probably win. So are we saying that they will join Liverpool, Arsenal and Spurs and make it 4 in the Champions League? Do we need to worry about them at all?
No, I mean, I respect Fulham, but they're a side, I think, on the beach on the last day of the season against the City side, by the way, Mark, in the league are unbeaten in 9, and their performance against Bournemouth was very good, could have scored a lot more. I think City will make it. I think Newcastle at home against Everton. Everton are terrible on the last day of the season, always have been. Even when I was there, I remember a game against Southampton when there was nothing to play for, and Southampton needed a win down at the Dell, and we stunk the place out, and Southampton beat us, and Walter Smith went crazy because we didn't have that juice and that adrenaline in us to try and get anything from the game. So I think Newcastle will beat Everton. The big game, mate, has to be Forest and Chelsea. I mean, that's where all the jeopardy, to all the drama. No wonder LME's not on the show tonight because he's panicking. He's got no fingernails left, so he can't bear to be on the show. He won't be able to watch the 90. But, mate, honestly, the drama in that game, it's going to be incredible.
That's probably the game of the weekend, with both sides still having a chance of Champions League. Chelsea, of course, in 5th right now, so they occupy the 5th and final spot as far as the league is concerned. How do we look at this game? Because both sides know that they can still get Champions League, but Nottingham Forest know that they can only do it with a win. So do you expect them to deviate at all from the formation or the tactics that Nuno normally goes for? And also, from a Chelsea perspective, if Forest do that, Chelsea have got a lot of pace middle to front that they could exploit. Does that mean goals in this one?
I don't know, to be honest. I think it does, but because there's so much drama and jeopardy on the game, there's a fear that either side will be too scared to go and win the game because you don't want to be the man that makes the mistake. I've been there. I've been there plenty of times on the last day. I remember a game against Coventry in 98 where we had to bet a Bolton's result, and we just about did, but it was 1-1 going into the last couple of minutes. And every time we got the ball, we just flipped it around the corner and got rid of it because you didn't want to be the man that made the mistake. I guess it's going to be a similar feeling in this game. I think the first 15 might be very, very cagey and you'll not see a lot of quality. It might be jeopardy end to end or just players helping it on, trying to get the ball and playing for territory. As the game unfolds and the tactics start to kick in and Forest's atmosphere will drive them and take them on the front foot, you'd imagine they'll be more optimistic. They can try and take the lead. How do Chelsea approach it, being the away side who like a little bit of possession where Forest are not bothered? They're more or less one of the best in the Premier League at saying you can have the ball as much as you want. We don't care, but we're going to hit you on the counter with the speed that they've showed all season in the form that Chris Wood's been in. So I think stylistically, you're looking at two sides that'll face each other and they're completely different, but it will make for a really good game of football. I've got no idea what the scoreline is going to be. Normally, you've got an inkling on how the game's going to be. Is it going to be 3-3 or 3-2? No idea, mate. But there's going to be goals in it. There's going to be jeopardy. There's going to be drama. All it needs is a couple of yellow cards or a red, or the goalkeeper to do something crazy, or a VAR decision to go against the team, and how the game unfolds and the patterns of play. But it feels like because there's so much riding on it, it's Champions League or bust. And the reason why I mentioned LME being a Villa fan, I mean, I've got this game down as a draw, the Forest Chelsea game. So that means if Villa win, they'll go into the top 5 and they'll sneak in. But that's where the drama's all at in the top 5. It's going to be an incredible watch.
Nottingham Forest have had a brilliant season, and it's been frustrating because it promised so much Champions League, and now it's looking like Conference League if they don't get it done this weekend. They've not kept a clean sheet since the 1st of April against Manchester United, and it's been a season prior to that that was built on the bedrock of keeping clean sheets. Yeah. Have teams started to work them out in how you can score against Forest? Or if not, what's changed?
I think what's changed is I think from about a month ago when they played Everton at home and everyone around them that weekend had winnable games. I think Newcastle battered Man United up at St James's. Chelsea had an easy fixture. All the teams in and around the Champions League places had an easy game or an easy fixture where you think, yeah, they're going to win. And Forest's approach against Everton was something that I've not seen all season. And I got the feeling, I commentated on the game, it felt like they were looking over their shoulders. It didn't feel as though they had that eyes on the prize and beat Everton at home and they're going to get top 5. It's almost they were a little bit afraid to go and dip for the finishing line. So I think what teams have done, teams have obviously worked Forest out a long time ago because everyone, knows how they're going to play. They're going to say to teams, you can have as much possession as you want. We're not bothered, but we're going to hit you with a counter and we're going to be dogged and we're going to try and keep clean sheets, even though, as you said, they haven't got a great record of late. That's what Nuno, I think, will build this game on in the first 15. It'll be don't give anything away first 15, first 20. Keep the fans on side. Try and make sure you're on the front foot. If you've got to go long, go long. Long throws will come in the box. Corners will come in the box. And I think they'll ride that wave of being on that front foot and keeping the fans engaged. What you don't want, I think, if you're a Forest fan at the City Ground, is seeing a Chelsea side turn up and slow the game down and just having possession and going sideways and taking the noise out the stadium. So Forest have to make sure they approach it and they've got to make sure basically they play the best version of themselves.
I've got a couple more games, and you mentioned Newcastle, Everton, and I want to look at Man United against Villa. And after we've looked at them, I want to look at what Champions League money would do or would not do for various teams next season. We've already seen Manchester United coming out today, and the suggestion is they might have to get rid of more staff, and they've lost maybe over £100 million by not qualifying for the Champions League next season, having lost to Spurs in the Europa League final. Before we get to that, Newcastle against Everton. Now, the pre-match press conference of Eddie Howe talking about Alexander Isak and his fitness, and they'll have another training session. We'll see how he is. It's a big drop-off. Callum Wilson's a really good striker, but he's not played much, and we saw that last week when he started in the absence of Alexander Isak. So without Isak, if he doesn't play against Everton on Sunday, Anthony Gordon's not really got back up to speed following his injury. Jacob Murphy was subbed last week. Where's the Newcastle goals coming from on Sunday if Isak doesn't play?
St James's Park. They can turn it on against anyone. Honestly, they can. They're a side that demand your attentions and your game plan has to be on the front foot. I'd back Newcastle to beat anyone, and I mean anyone. I've seen them beat Man Cities. I've seen them being the best sides. I've seen them smash Spurs by 6. The fans demand it. I think on any given day, I think you might see a game where if Isak's not fit, I think he'll be on the bench. And I think if needed, he might come on for half an hour or 10, 15 minutes. I think talking Champions League and the money that it will provide if Newcastle make it, I think it'll quieten the noise because Livramento's been linked with Man City today at right fullback. I think Pep said today there's no way back for Kyle Walker. He's going to come back from his loan move at Milan. So you'd imagine at Man City there's going to be casualties. Newcastle are a team that's got loads of top-end players. Liverpool have had a long-standing interest in Anthony Gordon. Every club, including Liverpool, Man City, would be after Alexander Isak if they didn't make Champions League football, so it would quieten all the noise. I think what's happened, I think you're going to look at an Everton side who had all the emotion of Goodison Park last week, and it's going to be hard for those boys to try and raise a leg for that game up at St James because it doesn't really matter if Everton win the game. They don't go anywhere in the league. There's nothing really to play for. Branthwaite, I think, done his hamstring late on in that game, so Michael Keane will probably play in his position. Like I said before, I've been in an Everton side where, on the last day of the season, there's nothing to play for. We need the juice. We need adrenaline. That's what footballers thrive on. So I think you'll see a Newcastle side that's got it all to play for, and they'll put Everton under pressure. I think they'll win the game comfortably, to be honest. I think it'll be one in the first half an hour.
Yeah, and what you can also do with Newcastle, you could play Gordon as a false 9 or through the middle. You could have Barnes one side, Murphy on the other. You get goals from Bruno Guimaraes. You get goals from Tonali. So even Kieran Trippier from the right-back area can get forward. So, yeah, that's going to be a tough one for Everton. Newcastle win, they'll be playing Champions League football next season. So the other game, Manchester United against Aston Villa. I mean, this is all about Villa. What kind of Manchester United opposition will be provided after what happened on Thursday night?
Who knows? The kit man might play. Ruben Amorim might play himself at right back. goalkeeping coach might play as on the left-hand side because he said Amram he's better than Marcus Rashford, so there's every chance he might start in the game. I think, who knows? I think you're looking at the Man United side that'll be deflated. They'll be hurt. Now, normally that's a recipe for a team to bounce back. That's normally how you would see it. If a team's lost a final, a Europa League final, they'd bounce back and win the game, but they're in terrible form. There's nothing about Man United you can lean on unless they do something miraculous, which you haven't done all season. I think you might even see people like Bruno Fernandes be on the bench. I think they might play a lot of young kids. But who knows? Because their form has just been horrendous all season. They put all their eggs in Europa League basket, and that went bust against Tottenham midweek in a disaster show because neither team played well. But I got the feeling that the trophy was more important to Spurs, but the Champions League money was more important to Man United. So they're going to be a team and a club now that are going to be scratching their heads thinking how many hundreds of £1 million have we lost not making Champions League. But in terms of the game, it stinks of a Villa win. I mean, I'd surprised if the form that they've been in, only 1 loss and 9, don't go to Old Trafford and turn them over.
I think I said Thursday for the Europa League final. I'm so used to them playing on a Thursday night, but of course it was Wednesday. So out of the teams that are either in the top 5 right now or trying to get into the top 5, would you say there's one team above all the others who hasn't yet qualified for the Champions League that it's most important to do so? And I say that without really wanting Manchester City as part of this conversation, simply because they're the obvious one, but they're probably going to get what they need. A draw at Fulham, because no one's catching their goal difference, the teams out of certainly Aston Villa. So Newcastle, Chelsea, Aston Villa or Nottingham Forest. Who does it mean the most to get in, and who would it change the most as far as transfer targets are concerned if they could get in, or potentially if they couldn't?
I mean, if you're a Newcastle fan like I am, I'm going to say Newcastle because then Newcastle keep their best players. They keep Tonali, they keep Gordon, they keep Isak, they can strengthen. Chelsea have got all these players on 8-year contracts, so financially it's massive for them. Villa got harmed, and my favourite worst subject of all time, talking about PSR, it harmed Villa when they got in the Champions League. They had to sell Douglas Luiz. Newcastle got in the Champions League, had to sell Minter to Brighton. They had to sell Elliot Anderson to Forest. So it matters everything to all of them, to be honest. I mean, I would lean on it being Newcastle because, as I said, it gives Newcastle a real chance of keeping their best players and also strengthening. If Newcastle, because I think they're pretty safe, I think, this summer, because they haven't spent an awful lot on transfers. It feels like they've got a few bob to spend in the summer, only if they make Champions League. The PSR thing, I scratch my head. I can't stand it. I hate it because, when Villa sold Douglas Luiz, it harmed them trying to get closer to the top 2 or 3. When Newcastle got there after their brilliant Champions League campaign, it harmed them selling Elliot Anderson and Minter to Brighton. They couldn't then kick on. And what you want is a fair league that can try and catch the likes of Liverpool or Man City or Arsenal. That's what the Premier League's based on. It's based on, in any given time, we've got the strongest league in the world, so it must mean something, and it should mean something. So teams like Villa, Newcastle and Chelsea have to be allowed, if they make Champions League, to try and spend and to try and get closer to the Arsenals, City and Liverpools, as I mentioned. So all those teams will be banking on the Champions League money. I think Newcastle, to answer your question, mate, I think it means so much to Newcastle fans if they can make it.
If Chelsea fail to beat Nottingham Forest and miss out on the top 5, what could be the result next season of them not being in the Champions League as far as players that they would want to attract and maybe players they might have to sell?
Yeah, that's the rise and fall, and that's the pitfalls if you make Champions League football or you don't. I mean, Chelsea have been linked with so many players, and there will be this summer. I think they want to try and bring a number 9 in, whether that's João Pedro or Šeško or some of the names that are out there. Kokoresh is another player that's been mentioned, but they're going to need the Champions League money because, as I said before, they've got all these guys on 8-year contracts. There might even be talk of Cole Palmer leaving to go and play Champions League. I don't think it will, but it'll put pressure on Enzo Maresca if he doesn't make it, because winning the Conference League for Chelsea will be a decent trophy. West Ham loved winning that competition, but for Chelsea fans who are used to winning Champions Leagues and used to winning Premier Leagues, they want to be amongst it with the big boys. So do they have to sell any players? Will Enzo Fernandez want to move on to the likes of Real Madrid? He's been linked with a move in the summer. So all this Champions League money and the lure of playing Champions League football and being in that pot in the Champions League come the summer is going to be critical you would have thought to a lot of the players, Maresca and Board at Chelsea, they have to bank on making it. If they don't, they might be banging trouble.
Let's play a little bit of a game here. Newcastle beat Everton, get Champions League football. There's money to be spent. Are you spending quality or quantity? In which areas of the park are you looking at? Assuming everybody stays, where do you want to strengthen and with who?
I think a goalkeeper. I think Mike Maignan is a goalkeeper at Milan. I think who is one of the very best there. They're taking away the likes of Donnarumma, who you're not going to prize out at PSG. I think a goalkeeper. But I don't think there's too much wrong. I'm not a fan of strengthening benches. I've never really had that thought process where people say thicken up the bench for your squad. I've always been under the impression if you can thicken up the 11 and make your 11 better, the guys who are in the 11 now will drip down onto the bench. I think Jacob Murphy's had an outstanding season on the right-hand side for Newcastle, but someone like Jared Bowen would boost the numbers, try and prize him out of West Ham, who might be a lifer, but you know, you offer West Ham the trouble that they're in, who need a bit of money to try and strengthen and rebuild their squad. You offer them something like 75 million with Jared Bowen. He's going to provide more firepower. Imagine the Newcastle fans going into next season with Jared Bowen on the right, Isak on the left, and Anthony Gordon, the likes of Jacob Murphy and Harvey Barnes on the bench. So that's where the thickening up of the squads come from, if you can improve that first 11. So again, massive for Newcastle if they can make it.
What about Manchester City? Pep said he wants a smaller squad. And you've got guys like Phil Foden that are struggling for form right now. Who would be the ones you'd be looking to move on if you were Pep to trim that squad?
Depends on the conversation that's been having behind the scenes. Is it a summer where Edison stayed one season too long? Does he want to move? Does Bernardo Silva want to move? Kyle Walker, we'd imagine, will be on the move in the summer. Pep said he'll be no part of the Club World Cup in the summer. Obviously, Kevin De Bruyne left, who played his last game last week. So emotional scenes for him, which is amazing to see. But you do feel as though they need a rebuild. Florian Wirtz is the player that you would have thought could fill De Bruyne's boots. But I think by seeing what I'm reading in the papers, Man City have sort of left that race. So it's down to Liverpool or Bayern who gets Wirtz. Morgan Gibbs-White, I think, is a player who would strengthen anyone, and he would suit Man City, I think, who can be great on the counter when needed, fantastic on the ball. Another player who can play like Marmoush, where he more or less guarantees you 10, 15 goals a season, on top of have improved Erling Haaland and Phil Foden and Marmoush. So I think Man City have got their ducks in a row in terms of the squad will be better next season only if the personnel can improve. And the one that comes to mind is Phil Foden, because he's had for his standards, a disaster season. So you'd imagine he needs a summer off. He needs a complete rest. He's pulled out, I think, of the England squad for next month. So he needs a summer off. Whether he plays any part of the Club World Cup, we'll have to wait and see. But I get the feeling, talking Man City, I get the feeling Rodri's another name, absolutely, that you must mention, who got minutes the other day. So he'll be a player that, ironically, might play minutes in the Club World Cup for his pre-season. But I think when you talk Man City, I just get the feeling that Pep would want to rest the majority of this side going into a campaign next season.
Okay, 5 into 3 does not go. Which 3 teams will qualify and join Liverpool and Arsenal from the league, as well as Spurs from the Europa League as winners in next season's Champions League? We were live on the Full-Time Whistle on Sunday, so join me and Stevie Nicol for that at ESPN FC Live.